In 2013, Warner Bros. Announced a brand new 5-film franchise based on the fictional in-universe textbook Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, a minor reference from JK Rowling's original Harry Potter books. Because JK Rowling realised, oh nuts, I can't write anything original! Set decades before Harry Potter's birth, the story follows Newt Scamander arriving in New York with a suitcase full of magical creatures. When some escape, chaos ensues. Meanwhile, political tensions between wizards and muggles escalate. I'm sorry, no, they're not called muggles because this is America, so you have to dumb it down. They're called no-majes, as in no magic.
The no-maj. No magic. The non-wizard.
It's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. And then a mysterious dark force begins wreaking havoc on the city. It's part creature feature, part wizarding noir, but rarely manages to commit to either fully. It's basically a game of Pokemon Go, just collecting creatures. And also there's this wizard stuff in the background. It's basically Wonka, but crap. I mean, a suitcase literally has a lever on it which switches it to Muggle vision, so then it appears to be normal. So why doesn't he just always leave it on Muggle vision? Doesn't make any sense. Nobody would ever find out he's a wizard, no creatures would ever escape, and there'd be no movie. We're all winners!
This'll be over in a jiffy.
The project was born out of a desire to extend the Potter brand, as JK Rowling clearly realised that she's a one-trick pony, and she wrote her first ever screenplay. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them started life as a fictional textbook within the world of Harry Potter, which the Hogwarts students would use in their studies. It was in 2001 when JK Rowling would end up publishing this fictional in-universe textbook as a real-life fictional textbook. Right. Which was sold to raise funds for the British charity Comic Relief. In September 2013, just 2 years after the end of the original Potter saga, it was announced that Fantastic Beasts would be adapted into a film, but the original idea was very different to what we ended up seeing. Instead of adapting an actual narrative, Warner Bros. Took the textbook's title and built a mythology around it, setting the story in 1926 New York City. Though this spin-off had Harry Potter DNA, it was never truly connected to the original saga in tone, character, or heart, and that would prove rather divisive. That's me being polite, it sucks. According to producer Lionel Wigram, the film was originally going to be a one-off wildlife documentary about magical creatures shot in the same style as a David Attenborough or Steve Irwin special. Okay, I low-key want to see that being presented by Hagrid.
Don't that look good?
It was this idea that inspired Lady Transphobe to write her own screenplay, the first of her career. Which isn't a surprise considering all of the fat jokes.
Alright.
Mr. Kowalski.
You gotta try the paunchkis, okay?
You need to sit down, honey. He hasn't eaten anything all day. And... oh, that's rough.
Though it ended up being a traditional movie script set to be the first of a 5-part saga, which is already ridiculous. How are you going to spread out a fictional book into 5 parts? With no book to adapt and Rowling writing the script from scratch, the film had enormous creative freedom, and that became part of the problem. The central conceit was muddled. Was it a whimsical magical creature adventure? A noir-ish political thriller? A backdoor Dumbledore prequel? It often felt like all of them, but also none of them. It was also initially rumoured that Alfonso Cuarón would be coming back to the series to direct, but this ended up being just a rumour. Before Potter veteran David Yates was confirmed to be returning to direct the first instalment, bringing visual continuity, but critics noted that his darker, more grounded tone clashed with the supposed light-hearted wonder of the film's magical creatures. Amazingly, for the role of Newt, Eddie Redmayne was the studio's first and only choice. He didn't have to audition, no other actor was even considered, and he even took part in the other casting decisions once he had been signed on. And this wasn't his first rodeo with the series, as he had unsuccessfully tried out for the role of young Tom Riddle back in Chamber of Secrets. Redmayne won an Oscar for The Theory of Everything and was riding high in prestige cinema, but his stiff, awkward performance divided audiences, with some finding it charmingly idiosyncratic, while others just dull and alienating. Additionally, both Kate Upton and Elizabeth Debicki were considered for the role of Tina, and Michael Cera was the first person asked to play Jacob, but he turned it down to do the Lego Batman movie instead. Smart man. Filming ran from August 2015 to January the following year, and amazingly the entire film was shot at the Warner Bros. Studio in Leavesden, England. Because so little architecture from the 1920s exists in New York City, the production had to build the entire set from the ground up. Not a single frame of the movie was shot at a real location. Okay, I have to admit that is really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, that is a slightly more severe reaction than I've seen.
And Colin Farrell as Graves, who's solid but then overshadowed by a last minute twist that doesn't really work. The surprise reveal of Johnny Depp as Grindelwald drew immediate backlash due to both casting controversy with Depp's personal life and the way that it undercut Farrell's stronger performance. And the fact that you don't see Grindelwald, you're just like, oh hey, it's Johnny Depp! The Niffler, a mischievous platypus-like creature, required months of animation work. Ironically, it was one of the most beloved elements of the film, often cited as the one thing that worked. Rowling's inexperience as a screenwriter really showed, as the original cut ran for over 2.5 hours and was edited down significantly, with many character moments and world-building scenes removed. The film's visual effects budget ballooned with over 1,400 visual effects shots, but critics felt the film often looked muddy and too dark, both visually and tonally. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them was released on November the 18th, 2016, and despite its disconnection from the previous movies, it was yet another hit, raking in $814 million worldwide. Despite marketing it as a return to the wizarding world, many fans felt emotionally disconnected, making it a box office success, but with far less enthusiasm than the Potter films. The common criticisms included Newt being too introverted and hard to root for, the story lacking a clear focus and tonal cohesion, the beasts feeling tacked on and not central to the plot, the Grindelwald twist that was unearned, and the film leaned too hard into dark political themes without proper setup. However, some still praised its ambition, world expansion, and Fogler's Jacob as a relatable everyman. Certain things were changed, however, as a scene was shot in which Newt took off his shirt, revealing several scars that he had collected over his years of dealing with magical creatures. Redmayne actually worked out specifically for this scene, but it was later deleted. Additionally, a scene was shot that showed Credence still alive after his smoke monster form was destroyed. This was cut as the filmmakers hadn't decided where they wanted the character to go in later movies. If only they planned out these stories before making them.
I really don't have a preference.
The idea of diving into wizarding history had potential, but the execution was frustratingly uneven. While Fantastic Beasts was intended as the launchpad for a 5-film epic, its lukewarm reception began to chip away at the franchise's credibility. Many felt like this was a needless and forced extension of a story that had already ended perfectly in Deathly Hallows Part 2. The heart, emotion, and depth of the original series was absent, replaced with hollow world building, murky storytelling, and divisive creative choices. Yeah, pretty much half of the movie is Newt and his mates playing magical Pokemon, and the other half is focused on child abuse and wizard Hitler. Although it is worth it just to see people pick on Ezra Miller. Good.
Thank you.
Don't get me wrong, the opening is really dramatic as they cover some exposition in a really cool newspaper report sequence, and it is pretty sweet to hear the Harry Potter theme song again. And there lies one problem. Other movies do go into the nostalgia angle, but they also have their own story wrapped around it. This one focuses purely on nostalgia.
Are you a seeker?
I'm more of a chaser, really.
Aloha Mora. Leader Lestrange. I've heard of that family.
I think you'll find that the best wizarding school in the world is Hogwarts.
Remember that thing we like? Remember?
Something is stalking our city, wreaking destruction and then disappearing without a trace.
Boris Johnson?
Got back.
From Europe, sir?
I always love how Americans refer to Europe as if it's a singular place. You went to Europe. Where did you go? Madrid or Watford? And I know I've already made fun of it, but referring to muggles as no-mages is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. Why did we make this bitch famous for her writing again? Although this does remain consistent with the Harry Potter movies by changing the rules constantly. Sometimes they can cast spells without saying a word.
Huge hippopotamus.
Other times he needs to speak.
Finesse.
But hey, they also need a permit to have a wand in America, but not a gun. Only in the States.
What?
Admittedly, the CGI of the humans' interaction with the creatures has at least significantly improved since the Potter films. Although other times they remind me of why the practical effects in the first 8 movies were so much better. They have some decent visual effects and it does look pretty good for the most part. There's certainly a lot of time and effort put into the production and by the actors. They really are trying their best. Farrell and Redmayne are genuinely really good in this, especially the latter, who is a lot of fun, but the issue is, especially with the intention being to spread it across 5 movies, there's just not a lot going on. It's Newt rushing around collecting creatures. This is the plot of a 20-minute Pokemon episode, not a 2.5-hour fantasy film. It's just boring. By the 45-minute mark in the first movie, we had met all 3 kids, the Dursleys and Hagrid, and were on our way to Hogwarts. I also love how there's nobody around to see any of this. Ah yes, it's the quiet time of night in New York City. But you want to know the epitome of comedy? Oh, and this rhino is intending to sexually assault them. I wish I was making this up. You know, with Voldemort being born through rape, the Weasleys selling date rape spells, and now a rhino trying to rape. JK Rowling, do you need a hug? Has somebody hurt you? Can we sit you down with a therapist? Do you need to talk to someone? Were they fat, this person that hurt you? Is that the problem?
I really couldn't say.
We get this big conference room scene, which just annoys me for the simple phrase,
Tonight's keynote speaker needs no introduction from me.
so then why are you giving him an introduction? The production design is decent and everything, but it's just so bland and lifeless. It's also boring to look at. It's all grey. The problem is the film just doesn't have any substance. And maybe it's just me, but Ezra Miller never seems like they're actually in a movie. In every film I've seen them in, they always come across like someone who just lingered around outside the studio and the producers felt bad, so they dragged them inside for shelter, and now they're in a movie and they have a career. Maybe that's the real reason this series got canned. JK Rowling found out that Ezra Miller's non-binary.
We'll be the judges of that.
And it's no surprise that the music sounds like Saw. Considering watching it is like being in a trap.
And try very hard not to be predictable.
Gonna be tricky when you're following a JK Rowling script. Speaking of which, remember in the books, all of the ableist stuff, where kids who were born without magic powers were demonized, they were vilified. Oh, look at them, oh! Well, it's a good thing JK Rowling wrote this script.
You're a squib, Credence. I could smell it off you the minute I met you.
So not only am I not taking a big villain named Credence seriously, but the whole third act is so rushed, it's ridiculous. We focus mostly on Newt collecting gold coins or whatever so he can rescue Princess Zelda, but then it's like they just realised, oh crap, we need a villain and a third act. Oh look, it's Credence. To be fair, I think my first instinct would be to shoot at Ezra Miller as well. We're also supposed to care that Credence just died as if they were such a big important character, but who gives a crap? It is pretty cool as Farrell transforms into Depp. And genuinely, the cast was supposedly unaware of this casting choice and he was shot separately, so they genuinely found out in post-production. Can't wait to see him more throughout the rest of the series. Oh, and despite Newt and Tina instantly being sentenced to death earlier, Grindelwald, who has murdered several, only gets thrown into prison. Some have said that since it's actually Colin Farrell, who was Grindelwald in disguise, who gives them the death sentence, and he's obviously evil and biased, but I'd counter that by saying, why does nobody else object? They're fine with this punishment. Yeah, just lock up Ted Bundy, he's learned his lesson, okay, cool.
You cannot obliviate an entire city.
Hermione literally erased herself from existence. And she was 17! They end up using this eagle to spread memory erasing rain, but it somehow still works on people who are indoors. And it's definitely the rain because they forced the fat guy outside before Rowling gets some more of her fix by having her sexually assault a comatose man who no longer consents and has no idea who he is. And this is what erases his memory. So I repeat, how does everyone else indoors lose their memory? Admittedly, the acting is pretty solid and he is a likeable character. So after that whole journey together, it is pretty sad that they've lost their companionship. But the movie just keeps on going. How many endings do you need? Oh, are you kidding me? And you pieces of doo-doo!
If you hadn't said all those nice things to Madame Pickery about me, I wouldn't be back on the investigative team now.
I mean, he also nearly got you killed. Oh my god, wrap up and end like the franchise should have done! This movie is awful. It's worse than any of the Potters by a country mile. And a regular mile. And all of the miles. It doesn't feel like a fully fleshed out story. It feels like a filler children's book you read to shut them up before bed. It's boring, the characters aren't particularly engaging outside of Newt, and it lacks the, excuse the pun, magic and charm from the previous series. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them may have aimed to recapture the magic, but for many viewers, it only highlighted what made the original Potter film so special, and what this series sorely lacked. It felt more like a corporate spin-off than a passionate expansion, and despite the budget and talent involved, it failed to capture the wonder, warmth, and emotional stakes that defined the Wizarding world. The fact that they genuinely thought this concept could be stretched across 5 films is astounding, and it further cements my belief that Rowling isn't as good a writer as she leads the world to believe.